This episode of After the Quiet contains personal experiences and discussions related to medical trauma, cancer scares, emotional abuse, coercive control, grief, and loss. Some content may be distressing or triggering for listeners. Hi, and welcome back to After the Quiet. This is episode 62. Today's episode is about how the moment my focus shifted away from him and onto my own survival. Because while my marriage was falling apart, while my life felt completely out of control, suddenly I was faced with something terrifying: my health. At the end of the summer, I had noticed a lump in the upper right side of my abdomen. At first, I tried not to panic. I had lost a lot of weight during everything that had happened that summer. Stress, anxiety, survival mode. So when I went to my family doctor, he thought maybe it was just a lipoma. Something harmless. A fatty lump. But to be safe, he sent me for an ultrasound. And that's when things started to change. The ultrasound didn't look like a lipoma, so they ordered an MRI. And I remember trying to stay calm, trying not to spiral, convincing myself it was probably nothing. Then, the day before I was supposed to leave on a camping trip with my students, the doctor's office called. And the tone was different. They told me I needed to come in immediately, that I didn't even need an appointment, just show up. And I knew. You don't get calls like that for good news. When I got there, my doctor sat me down and explained that the MRI results could be one of 3 things. And 2 of them were cancer. I remember my whole body going numb. He told me he was referring me to a cancer hospital. And then he asked me something surreal. If they call you this week, will you be able to go? And I remember saying, I'm supposed to be leaving to go camping with my students. Even in that moment, I was still trying to be responsible for everyone else. He suggested I go for lung x-rays that evening, because if it was cancer, he wanted to make sure it hadn't spread to my lungs. So, while most people would have been packing for a camping trip, I was standing in a hospital, getting chest x-rays, wondering if I had cancer. Luckily, my lungs were clear, and somehow I still went on the trip. Looking back, I don't even know how I functioned during that time. The next month, I had my first appointment at the cancer hospital. And the oncologist wanted another MRI done at their facility. So I had another one. And that's when they discovered something terrifying. The lump had grown. It had already increased in size since the first MRI. So they scheduled me for a biopsy in December. And by then, I was living in constant fear, trying to parent, trying to teach, trying to hold my marriage together, trying to survive emotionally, and now trying to mentally prepare myself for the possibility of cancer. I had the biopsy done, and immediately afterward, I got another devastating piece of news. My grandmother had passed away. My family had waited to tell me until after the procedure because they didn't want me going into the biopsy carrying even more emotional weight. And I remember thinking, how much more can one person take at once? When the biopsy results finally came back, I learned that I did, in fact, have a tumor. It was growing inside my abdominal muscle, but thankfully, no organs were involved. I was transferred to an oncologist at a different hospital, someone who had more experience with my specific type of tumor. And under her guidance, we decided on a wait-and-see approach. Every 6 months, I had MRIs to monitor the growth, watching, waiting, living with uncertainty. She also suggested something else: stopping my birth control, because she suspected hormones could be affecting the tumor. And that decision affected our relationship too, because since he didn't like condoms, he decided to get a vasectomy. And slowly, something changed. My tumor stopped growing. Then eventually, it became stable. And over time, it actually started shrinking. My oncologist warned me that if it had continued to grow, radiation would have been the next step. But thankfully, that never happened. Still, that period of my life changed me. Because while I was living through this medical scare, life kept hitting me over and over and over again. First, I lost my aunt, and then, only 6 weeks later, I lost my dad. And during all of it, his controlling behavior became worse than it had ever been. Because even while I was terrified about my health, even while I was grieving, even while my family was falling apart around me, that control never stopped. In some ways, it intensified. And in the next episode, I'm going to talk about what it's like trying to survive grief while living under constant emotional control. Thank you for listening to After the Quiet. Please remember to subscribe to this podcast and share it with others who might need to hear my story. And also join me on Instagram at after.the.quiet. If you recognize parts of my story in your own, please reach out to someone who can give you support, or look for that support in your community. You are not weak for needing help. You are human. Your voice deserves to be heard.